Dow was down 25 points. It had a rally, but it fizzled out and went negative. The S&P was up much higher, about 1.25%. Gave it back. We were up 0.55%, up 32 points, and giving back much of the rally. We were above 6,000. We closed at 59.75. Nasdaq was up 1.24% and up at much higher levels. Gave some of that back. The Russell ended up flat. And the VIX was down about 0.5%. Now, the VIX predicted that we would have an update today on the S&P 500. It was down by greater than 10% on Friday. The VIX was correct again. Could we see a pullback? We've seen NVIDIA have a big push higher, going up into resistance, overhead resistance. So, again, we could see a pullback. Like I said, our lows very well could be in, and we could be starting the final climax rally now. VIX dropped below the 50-period moving average there on Friday. And again, dropped more than 10%. Predicted we were going to have the rally today. It was correct. We might see volatility drop and get that move on the S&P back up to a new all-time high. That's very likely. Now again, just quickly, if we can end up getting a rebound with the Dow here and with the Russell, then maybe we could see the S&P move to a new all-time high. The Dow might, if it forms a divergence with the transports. I've talked about that, and I showed you the chart over the weekend. Watching to see, do we try to find a bottom here and get a rebound, or do we have to go lower before that happens? And if so, then the S&P still could try to go fill the gap. My guess is that we have a short-term bottom in, and that we're now going to try to resume the advance. Dow's already filled the gap from the presidential election back over here. So just some things to be aware of. And then we'll be watching with the Dow. Does it get a lower high, or can it get a higher high? And if it does get a higher high, does it diverge with the transports as I've been talking about? We had this larger divergence between the Dow up here and the transports down here, but can we get a new high on the Dow, maybe back up to this trend line or something, and again see them end up diverging? Does that happen? Sometimes that's the way it plays out. That's the way it played out over here. They had a divergence back in 2022. There's a long-term signal here that could be marking a major top. The transports are failing to confirm the Dow's new highs, at least so far. I told you momentum had turned back to bullish with NVIDIA previously, and then it got a breakout. Bitcoin had momentum turn bullish. Now the trend signals are trying to turn bullish, at least some of them on Bitcoin. We could see the S&P and the Nasdaq follow suit if this is an ABC type of a correction and the bullish divergence that we saw in the 60-minute chart plays out. We got the stochastic turning back up, forming its own bullish divergence right here. The awesome oscillator, and we've moved slightly lower than this low by a couple points. The awesome oscillator did move lower, but we got a green bar today with the rally. Now again, we didn't close at the highs, and we weren't able to flip the cloud here in the daily time frame, but we did get above our 50-period moving average gap higher. We'll see if we fill the gap or not, but I'll be watching to see if we can get a bullish reversal of conditions here in the coming days here in January. We're going to try to resume the advance. Guesses we're going to with the S&P and move towards that upper channel line on the weekly chart. But a green bar here. Again, we'll be watching to see if the MACD can firm up. If you watch my Bitcoin video, the MACD and the price oscillator, they firmed up after going slightly negative. I think S&P will probably do the same thing, and we could see a larger divergence probably develop going into January, some point in the first quarter. But again, like I keep saying, I think you got a good shot. It could happen in January. We start a powerful move higher. I'm going to flip this cloud, though. I told you now here's a weekly chart of the S&P. I told you I thought we'd see more green bars on the awesome oscillator here. Remember, we just started the red bars on NASDAQ. I'll show you what's going on with that. But I think as we bounce off the 20-week moving average, we got that bottoming tail, we got a bullish hammer. We didn't flip the cloud to bearish. It remained bullish. So I think you're going to still get another push higher. I think you'll see at some point a green bar or two here in January. And then I think we'll, that upper channel line on the weekly chart, and I think we'll top there. I think we'll see the stochastic turn back up. So again, I remain bullish in the weekly time frame. Those divergences are forming and have given us about a 4.5% sell-off on the S&P. We've recovered off of the 20-period moving average, though. I think we'll continue to try to make new all-time highs, but I do think a top is going to happen. A rise to new all-time highs the narrative is going to be, here we go. And then again, you're going to get a massive, massive rug pull. A lot of the selling didn't happen in the fourth quarter. We got some in October, and we got some in December there, some distribution. But again, not aggressive selling to really reverse the trend here in the weekly time frame. And I think a lot of the delay was due to taxes waiting, for the fat cats waiting for the new year. I think we're still going to go to new highs, and then I think you're going to complete this one more reference point of a divergence right here. And again, we already had this divergence give us this sell-off in July. I think you've got this divergence that has given us a December sell-off of 4.5%. I think we get one more push higher, and then I think you get your reversal. But I think that's going to take us to that upper channel line I've talked about. S&P weekly here. I'm trying to get back above that 10-week moving average as well, bouncing off our 20. We'll see what happens. NASDAQ gets the second red bar, and again, be watching for is if NASDAQ 100 makes a new high, because I think S&P will NASDAQ 100, or does it end up diverging with the S&P? Our second red bar, and again, it could make new all-time highs as well, especially if Bitcoin does, a MicroStrategy, which I think they will. Talk about MicroStrategy in my latest Bitcoin video that's linked at the end of this one. You can check that out. Remember, MicroStrategy is on the NASDAQ 100 now, so if it tops out and tanks, you have a lot of volatility. Big move up, big move down on NASDAQ, so we'll be watching. Here we're bouncing again. Didn't quite reach the 20-week, but we got back above that 10-week moving average, and we're trying to bounce here. So again, we'll be watching to see if we try to move to a new all-time high. Daily chart here on the NASDAQ. And daily chart, our stochastic turning back up. Our MACD is still in positive territory. Very well may turn up, and we may see a larger divergence develop here on the MACD in the month of January. And right now, hard to see, but the oscillator went slightly negative here. So the oscillator is negative, but again, we tried to flip the cloud at the highs of the session, just barely, and couldn't flip it here on the NASDAQ either. So you still have a bearish momentum cloud in the daily time frame here on NASDAQ and on S&P. So we'll be watching to see if we can flip the cloud at some point this week. We will have a short trading week. It will be closed for a National Day of Mourning to remember President Carter. A third week of short trading week. So we'll be watching to see if we can flip the cloud here, flip momentum here with the bullish reversal of conditions. We still have a bearish reversal of conditions, but Bitcoin and NVIDIA did it. I think you got a good shot that we're going to see it with the S&P and NASDAQ. S&P daily here. Please support the channel with the link directly below. That allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the charts, you like the indicators, please let me know that by supporting the channel today. You can take a moment to do that. I would appreciate it. Just follow the link below. It'll take you to a secured site. You can donate any amount you want or make it a recurring donation. Most YouTube channels make their money by sponsors. I turn those offers down. I don't want to sell you stuff, and it's just a lot of shady deals on the internet there. Gold websites that want to charge you triple commissions. I just don't want any part of that stuff. So I just ask that you partner with me and support the channel. Do what you can to help out, but I need to hear from you in order to make it work. If you could take a moment to do that, I would really, really appreciate it. I thank you for that. Again, if the Russell and the Dow can rebound, which again, they've had sharp sell-offs. The Russell's dropped nearly 11% here. The Dow 6.6%. If they can rebound off these 100 period moving averages with the dojis that we got with the diversions here, then we can rebound. The Russell, it still may test this trend line in the 200 period before attempting a rebound. It may do something like that and then go like that. We'll be watching. But I'll be watching to see if we can get a January rally. And I think we'll set up a lower high with the Russell. I think the Russell has peaked with this divergence. We talked about the sell-off here before it happened with this divergence here. We had the same divergence down here on the MACD. So again, we'll be watching. If we go lower, the histogram may tick down and we may end up forming a larger divergence. But again, if it curls up, it's a bullish cross, then we may again establish this as a low. That's what Bitcoin did. So we'll see if we can get some traction back up on the Russell and the Dow. And if we do, I think the S&P will be at new all-time highs. And then we'll be watching to see if NASDAQ Dow can make new highs. This is a Russell's peak, though. Looking for a January rally. See if the bottom is in yet here with our doji after that 11% drop. Now watch the trend line and the 200 period moving average. Now again, we've had this low right here, and it's been right at that trend line right there from these previous lows. And again, you've got a possible head and shoulders. Same thing Bitcoin did, actually. I think we can establish a low here, and if we don't, you've got your gap fill directly below at 57.83. But I think that we can have an ABC move, and it may be done now, and get our final push higher here. And again, I've drawn some trend lines here. We broke this trend line, and we really didn't get a convincing confirmation. And over here, again, you got a bottoming tail, so you really didn't get convincing confirmation and follow through at all. Then we broke this trend line from that low right there, connected to the August low, and you broke it, and you got right back above the trend line. So again, you got to see confirmation and a follow through, and we haven't seen that. So I think you've got an ABC move here, and again, it very well could be done. The dotted line, the dotted blue line right here, I've drawn a parallel boundary up here, and again, that could take us up, give us a January rally, could be forming a channel. Rising wedge breakdown could be evolving into a channel with our breakdown, our back test rejection at the 20, and then now this rebound. And again, Bitcoin is flipping signals around. The market could follow Bitcoin's lead. It already did, and it got that breakout last Friday. So if we do move up here towards the upper boundary of this potential channel, should this low hold right here, then moving towards that upper channel line in the weekly time frame. Now, I pointed out the MACD has been in positive territory, and firming up at the center line has really marked the pullbacks. And again, over here and over here. And now we've gone negative, just like what Bitcoin did. It went negative with the MACD and the price oscillator, but it's firming up. We could see the same thing happen. Now, it's still possible we pull back or even come down and fill the gap and then hit this trend line, this black trend line, which again, I've drawn another possible channel with that from the peaks over here. So again, we'll be watching, see if we develop a bottom, and then if we start rising, do we go up to one of those trend lines or maybe up to the red trend line right here from the July peak? We'll be watching these different trend lines. Candle of indecision in the form of a spinning top today at our 20 period moving average with the gap higher. We'll see if fill the gap on a closing basis or not, and if we do we come back and does this low hold? And directly below we have the gap fill at 57.83 from the presidential election rally that took place over here, and then we have horizontal support from the July peak at 56.70. Below that is the 200 period moving average. So again, watching to see if we can get the rally back up in January and move to a new all-time high with the S&P. The Dow and the Russell can rebound. We'll see new all-time highs on the S&P, maybe on the Dow, but I think the Russell has likely peaked and will probably diverge with the S&P. We are, with this rally, getting the stochastic turning back up, and again, it's formed this little divergence. From Friday, it formed a little bullish divergence, much like what we saw on the 60-minute charts. It's a little hard to see on the RSI, but the RSI did get a little tiny divergence here with the S&P 500. Again, I've got the lines kind of covering up the RSI a little bit there, but again, you can see what I'm looking at. So again, I think that we could get the final climax move here in the daily time frame and take us up to that trend line in the weekly, which again is right here. And again, the trend lines are target, not a number. Again, we haven't reached it for 9 weeks. We reached it sooner, the target would have been lower. Right now, it's about in the 6,200 and 6,300 range, depending on when we come into contact with it. Still think we're going to reach that level. I think that'll complete the blow off top. We're going to see complacency take over with euphoria happening, just like at the December high. Nobody's going to think that, again, there's any possibility that the market will go down, but yet we saw the sell-off from the December highs, and I told you we could see a peak in December or January. That could be the peak, and it could be close but no cigar, but my guess is we're still going to reach this level unless I start seeing some real evidence that the December high was it. Don't see that evidence yet. We gapped higher on the 60-minute chart. You can see it right here. We gapped up at the open, and then we pulled back. We gave back, again, a lot of the gains. We still closed positive, but again, we have this gap fill now down here, and we went up and we filled the gap right here. Previously, when we were falling, remember, we back tested the triangle, the lower boundary of the triangle here, and back tested the broken trend line on the daily chart, which is this trend line right here. We back tested it and then turned down off of it. In order to resume the advance, we got to get the 50, the green line, back above the 200 period moving average. So we'll be watching, do we get a higher low and then, continue onward and upward? You got the gap here now, and again, we got a series of gaps overhead and directly below. We have the gap right here, and we have the gap right here, and we have the gap right here at 57.83. So those are three gaps there, and then we have the gap here that we just filled, 59.72 up here, 6,037, and we reach that 6,000 area, and then we turn down and move back below 6,000, and again up here, 6,074. So you got a couple of gaps up here, you got a couple of gaps down here. We'll be watching the gaps. We had that nice bullish divergence form at the start of the new year here, and that's played out. So we'll see. And again, you got a good chance that we've got a bottom in here. Momentum can turn back to bullish, getting a bullish reversal of conditions. Friday, we got a bullish signal here in the daily time frame, but the momentum line has not yet turned bullish. We had the gap higher. We'll be watching. You got to signals flip back to bullish, get back above the ribbon, have it turn bullish. We do have, again, bullish divergences. Here you can see it with momentum. We've got it with the RSI. We've got it with the stochastic and others on the 60-minute chart as well. So again, we'll be watching to see if that low can hold. Directly below, we have the 100 period moving average. We'll be watching that. But if we're going to go higher, momentum, the momentum line here, and momentum with the reversal of conditions, we've got to see those signals that the momentum turn back to bullish if we're going to resume the advance. I think we will. We've got to see the signals begin to flip. Same thing here with the NASDAQ daily chart. We've got a bullish signal right here, gapped higher, but we get a candle of indecision. The doji could be a continuation. S&P got a spinning top. We got a doji here. Could be a continuation or a reversal in that we could pull back, fill the gap, and then we can still try to go higher or test this low right here, maybe yet again. We'll see what happens. Remember, NVIDIA gapped higher today, goes back to fill the gap. The NASDAQ 100 very well could do the same. We'll be watching that. Doji, a candle of indecision today on the NASDAQ. Again, the momentum line still bearish at this point on the NASDAQ, that little red line right there. See the momentum signals turn back to bullish to resume the advance. And even if he goes to new highs, I'll be watching, does NASDAQ, again, do they end up diverging? Does this hold as a peak? Remember, we got that topping tail in the monthly time frame on the NASDAQ. There is a possibility that the top is in on it. If it does end up getting a bigger sell-off, it may just end up getting a lower high. We'll be watching to see how it unfolds. If momentum signals can turn back to bullish or not. Looking at the momentum line right here, I'm looking at that little red line, and I'm looking at bullish and bearish reversal of conditions. Cloud looked at earlier. Those signals are momentum. They've got to flip to bullish to resume the advance. And NASDAQ's trying to bounce off the 50-period moving average. I've drawn a trend line from there to that low. We did break the trend line from the low in August to this low right here, but again, no convincing, confirmation and follow through. We're getting back above the broken trend lines right now. So again, we could be establishing a larger rising wedge pattern or a new channel, and then we'll be watching, does this peak hold or not? We're getting back above 50 on the RSI. And I have another trend line here connecting this level here and the high right there. So again, just some different trend lines I'm looking at. We had this rising wedge, trying to break down, and it keeps failing, and we jump right back up. So we're watching this level. We are bouncing off horizontal support here for the NASDAQ from the July peak. Bouncing out that 50-period moving average. You got the 10 below the 20. The red line below the blue line is the 20. Candle of indecision today with the doji. NASDAQ today was up 1.09%, up 234 points. And again, we're seeing these divergences from the start of the year play out. Again, gapping higher today and then pulling back. So again, we'll be watching. Do we come back and fill the gap here? We have another gap here to be watching. And again, this low right here to see if it holds or not. And again, we had the nice diversions form on the MACD and on the RSI. We'll be watching to see if this low can hold right here at the 400 period moving average. NASDAQ has a gap up here directly overhead. We have another gap up here at the very top. Again, I'll be watching to see if we fill this gap or not. We don't have to, but we very well could. And if we do get the final climax move to the blow off top, we might exceed that level. Again, if we pull back, get a higher low, it could be the start of final leg higher, getting a 1 and a 2, and then we could get a 3. Could take NASDAQ and S&P to new all-time highs. My guess is that we'll see it with the S&P. We'll be watching to see if that happens with NASDAQ or not. You know, I've talked about the channels, the weekly and the monthly time frame, and again told you I still think the S&P is going to go make new all-time highs. I think the final climax phase of the rally, the final climax rally really is likely underway, and to complete the blow off top. Fascinates me is the similarities between Bitcoin and the S&P 500 and between Bitcoin and the NASDAQ Composite and the NASDAQ 100. The NASDAQ Composite has this channel. This is the monthly channel. It had the 2021 high over here after the pandemic low, and that was a topping tail. Has something similar to that here as we closed out the month of December. We're rebounding back up, and we talked about how the candlestick would have to be confirmed to mean anything. Fascinates me is that we have this channel going back to the pandemic low here, this larger channel, and we turned off of it right on the nose there. Still may overthrow it, as I've said. Then we have this smaller channel within it, and we may reach that. And again, if we overthrow it, certainly possible. But as what's very interesting is this is very similar to what's going on with Bitcoin right now. And again, there are similarities between NASDAQ 100 and NASDAQ Composite with Bitcoin. There are also similarities with the S&P 500 and Bitcoin, different things. They're all moving towards major long-term trend lines. That's what's a fascinating thing about it. But if you look at this chart, the larger channel, going back to the pandemic low and the 2021 high and the 2022 low, and then now, recent high here from December, the month of December, this is a monthly chart, very similar to what's going on with Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin could be in its final climax rally as well. The difference here is channel's a little bit larger. Again, Bitcoin is the asset with the most volatility, up and down. You get these big wild swings up and down. It goes back to the ending of the bear market in 2018 and the higher low with the pandemic there. But again, a nice trend line, parallel upper boundary. The first peak in 2021, if we exclude the shadow there, and you connect it to the top here in the second peak in 2021, nice parallel boundary going right into there. And I think that we could reach this level in January and get the final climax high for Bitcoin. I think that the S&P is going to do it as well. Remember, I think Bitcoin's going to hit this trend line. Well, the S&P moves up to the channel there in the weekly time frame. This is the weekly chart of Bitcoin, by the way. Again, I think, and Bitcoin's rallying big time today, MicroStrategy, more Bitcoin, my latest Bitcoin video, and I got some really cool charts. My last two Bitcoin videos, I also talk about the Elliott wave count here with this. Again, I don't talk much about Elliott wave because it's speculation. I have different counts going on, so I really don't share it with you very much. Those counts could be canceled out very easily, and I don't trade Elliott wave, but if you want to see some Elliott wave charts, I talk about two of my counts, one of the charts anyways. But I think Bitcoin could terminate the bull market in the first quarter here, and I think it very well could do it in January. And again, as I've said, we could see concerns about inflation. That's what the bond market has been suggesting. Now, just quickly, NASDAQ 100 has the same channel. We just overthrew it in the monthly time frame here. We're trying to do it now, but again, this other channel parallel to the lower boundary right here end up being reached, overthrowing this level. Sometimes that happens. This is a parallel trend line based on this lower boundary right here. Another channel where I excluded the low right there and just connect this low and draw a parallel boundary again with these highs over here. So again, looking at some of these different trend lines, like I said, I think we're going to go higher on the S&P, and then we'll be watching, can NASDAQ do it as well? Can we go higher, or did they end up diverging? Sometimes they diverge, like what we had back over in 2022. They did end up diverging. Maybe they don't this time. Just some different trend lines that I'm watching. It's that larger channel. Here's the trend line connecting these levels. It is now perfectly parallel with the blue trend line. I have just both of them drawn in here. But just levels I'm looking at. And also with the log scaling, that was linear with the log scaling. This trend line right here, which would take us again higher, which would be a rising wedge with the log scaling. Again, this is the linear scaling here. If we look at the log scaling long term, further back than 2020 on NASDAQ, we just look at all the data that we have for the NASDAQ 100 monthly chart. Again, we're slamming up into this trend line, and we turned off of it right on the nose there, just slightly overthrowing it just by a fraction there. Again, we could overthrow this level. The Dow did that. Long-term 125-year trend line. Longer term, I think we're going to reverse off of these levels and eventually go down and test a pandemic low in this midpoint right here, and likely see 65 to 80+% drop, a 65 to 80+% drop on the NASDAQ 100. I think a top will develop here, and again, we're in the final phase of the climax rally here. That's just going to create complete complacency. I think the recession in the first or second quarter in the stock market will peak and begin to price it in. But I wanted to show you the channels and stuff in the monthly and the weekly time frame, because again, Bitcoin doing the same thing. And again, a positive correlation. Talked about the S&P, and it's the long-term channel. And again, I think that the S&P is going to top out here, but I told you I thought we'd overthrow it. We did reach this level last trading day of November, which was Black Friday, just over a month ago. Here we are in early January. I think we're going to peak first quarter. I told you I thought we would peak in either December or January. At least you have a good start the week off with the rally. I told you to be watching to see if we can rally now off the 20-week moving average. I still think we're going to new all-time highs on the S&P. I think it'll end up diverging with Russell, maybe the NASDAQ, but we'll see. Everything else was selling off, though NASDAQ was going higher. Do we see the opposite of that now? We start seeing a tech sell off and everything else go higher. It'll be interesting to watch. Nevertheless, I digress. We're bouncing off with the bottoming tail off of that 20-week moving average. We had a rally today. We didn't close at the highs, but again, our divergences from the beginning of the year, the start of the year, on the 60-minute charts are playing out nicely. I think we're going to see the RSI turn back up here. I think you're going to end up with another reference point of a divergence. As we move further into January, I think you'll complete it, and then I think you'll turn. And I think Bitcoin will move up to its channel. I think the S&P, and again, similarities between S&P and Bitcoin. Also similarities between NASDAQ 100, NASDAQ Composite, and Bitcoin. Those channels from the pandemic lows just before it with Bitcoin. So very similar. I just wanted to show you, again, we're moving towards all these trend lines. And remember, NVIDIA is too, and NVIDIA sparked the rally today. NVIDIA was up big time. We moved off of the highs market, but NVIDIA, again, bouncing off this channel line, and again, likely headed towards this upper boundary again, maybe even overthrow it, possibly. I think you're going to see a top develop here with NVIDIA, and then eventually come back and break the trend line right here. And when that happens, I think it will terminate the bull market for NVIDIA, for the AI stocks, and for the stock market. NVIDIA is bouncing off the 20-week moving average and the lower boundary of the channel. Again, I think it could top in this area of this longer-term channel and then break this smaller channel. And if it does, I think it will terminate the bull market. And again, we had that breakout of NVIDIA on Friday of the bull flag pattern. I talked about the head and shoulders pattern with the lower high, or the breakout of the bull flag that takes us to new highs. Had a rally that went up to challenge those highs, but it fizzled out. We didn't close at the highs, but we still had a gain for the session, gapping higher. The breakout, we could come back and fill the gap, try to back test, but again, it doesn't look like that head and shoulders is going to play out, as we're now just underneath that peak right there. So again, we're probably going to exceed it, maybe pull back and exceed it. and then we'll be watching. I told you Nvidia was turning back to bullish with momentum and getting a breakout. Bitcoin turned back to bullish, and more bullish signals today for Bitcoin. So I told you the market was likely going to start seeing momentum turn back to bullish. Like I said, we still may end up getting a larger divergence here, building upon this one over here, and still move to higher levels on Nvidia, maybe moving back towards this trend line right here, and that could take us just above that other channel that I showed you, longer term channel. So just some things I'm watching on Nvidia. And again, get a divergence right here in the more recent price action. Again, as we've talked about both of those scenarios, but it looks like Nvidia is going to try to make a new high here. And again, form another reference point of a divergence here in the most recent price action and move just up here. So that's what I think is likely going to be the case for Nvidia. Help spark the January rally as the final phase of the climax rally in order to complete blow off tops.